bonjour everybody. Je viens de France, but the working language of OECD is English and French, and I speak in English today. So may I ask, who is a teacher among the audience? And who is researcher? And who is government officials? Who is from the private sector, including the publishers? Okay, who are the other employers, organizations? Okay, I can see a variety of backgrounds, and our project, OECD's Education 2030, relates to everybody. It's not only for teachers, but also for others, because in order to change the system, we need to work together. And who knows OECD? Thank you. So for those who don't know OECD, just one word. So we are the intergovernmental organization currently with 35 member countries, and Korea is a leading country in our project, thanks to the chairperson here. Because Korea is really thinking about the future of education, future of the nation, together with the OECD. And OECD has been focusing on economic growth, but we are renovating and our own growth narrative from economic growth to inclusive growth, which is the key towards the future of education. So our departure of our project is when a lot of economists started to project about the future of the jobs, not limited to education, but more broadly, and the kind of things that are easy to teach can be automated and outsourced, and what are the implications for the classroom. Then we looked at some analysis and looked at the skills demand in the labor market over the years. And this is analysis from the United States, and across different countries, we see the similar patterns. So the jobs that require routine, manual, or non-routine, but manual. And routine and cognitive also are on the decrease in the labor market. On the contrary, skills that require non-routine analytical and non-routine interpersonal are on the rise. So what are the implications for teachers? And we also looked at the rate of change in between technology and education. This is analysis from Professor Goldin from Harvard. And at the time of the Industrial Revolution, when technology were advanced of education, there was a social pain. Only those who benefit from technology benefited. Those who are left behind didn't benefit. Then the education system tried to catch up by providing universal public schooling for everybody, and then we were able to benefit the prosperity for the whole society. Now, at the time of digital revolution, what is happening is, of course, technology is ahead of us, so it's the time of social pain for those who are not benefiting from the digital revolution. So for us, what we need to do is to make this time of social pain as short as possible by making the education system change. So this requires a lot of courage, a lot of careful design thinking about our future systems for education. But to make this transformational change, not incremental changes, but rather making the transformational change does require everybody, as I said, to work together. And a lot more is coming with Google autonomous cars, 3D printing, and so on. But the world is not only facing technological changes, but it includes the migration, environment, citizenship, modern family, health, peace and security, employment inequality, and today's world is represented as Vuca world, meaning it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I'm going to go through some of the slides from the OECD data. I'm not going to go into detail, but just to show you how the world is changing. In terms of the migration, as you can see, OECD member countries, including Korea, is receiving more and more migrants from developing countries. And that has different implications for developed countries as the receiving end and developing countries as the sending countries. And in terms of the environment, growing carbon dioxide emissions are on the rise, and the Paris COP21 agreement is there, but unless everybody takes an action, it wouldn't stop this increase. And growing income inequality is overseen by across OECD countries and represented by Gini coefficient. And unfortunately, this is the trend across OECD countries. An Asian population, including my original own country, Japan, and also your country, Korea, are the two of the most rapidly steep increase Asian countries across the OECD countries. And overweight and obesity among children is also overseen as the key trends, unfortunately. And global increase of terrorist incidents has increased so rapidly after 2010. And living in France, I must say that terrorism is not something that I would see in a Hollywood movie anymore. It's really everybody's worries. So what is complicated is all these issues are interconnected, and it's very difficult to change one thing from one side because all the issues are multifaceted. So in these worlds, the global changes, as I said, technology, globalization, diversity, and so on, what do today's children need to do? It's not only to respond to these changes, but they need to create new demands to shape the new future. So the types of competencies is not only to respond to today's trends, but the competencies to create and shape the new future. That is the focus of our OECD's 2030 project. So we cannot predict the future, but we can actually prepare for it. So OECD has the Education Policy Committee where the government representatives meet together, and this project was launched first to step back and explore the bigger picture as well as the long-term challenges facing education by creating the conceptual framework. Because the governments often face challenges of everyday, immediate challenges in front of them, but in the long term, some of the policy actions taken may often cancel out some of the effects. So having this long-term, coherent policy design is very important. And also, we are tasked to conduct a curriculum analysis in order to make the process of curriculum design a more evidence-based and systemic process. Because almost all OECD countries reported to us that the curriculum design process that should matter for children are actually struggling because of the conflicts of interest and also the political ideologies. So they expect the OECD to create more knowledge-based, evidence-based knowledge base. So on this, it's very important in order not to be misunderstood that our project is not trying to prescribe any national curricula. We are simply seeking to establish common language across different stakeholders within and across different countries and provide a shared space where we can actually deepen our thinking about the effective curriculum design and explore issues around the design of the instructional systems with the global efforts. So the starting question was, what kind of competencies today's students need to shape their future for better lives in 2030? And what are the futures they want to create? And as I said at the beginning, even though my organization, OECD, stands for Organization for Economic development and cooperation, we are changing our economic narratives, shifting from economic growth to inclusive growth. Inclusive growth, of course, includes economic growth, but also placing the well-being at the center. So the education, not only for jobs and incomes, but also education for better community, better civic engagement, education for better health, education for better life satisfaction. So this is the OECD well-being framework. So we place this well-being at the center of our learning framework. And well-being includes both individual and social. It's not only one's well-being. So if somebody is happy, that is okay at the expense of others' unhappiness. The answer is no. So we are trying to find ways how to balance individual well-being and societal well-being. And this is a snapshot of a tiny bit, and you will see a bigger picture, but this is one section of our learning framework. So what kind of competencies students need towards well-being 2030? And you can see student is centered of this learning compass because we really place the student agency, the concept of student agency, as the heart of our learning framework. It's really about making students' own decisions rather than having others decide for students. And it's about students acting, not being acted upon. And it's students about shaping their own future towards well-being 2030. But there is a sign of caution when we reviewed all the literature. In order for all students to reach their potential by placing student agency at the center of the learning, it's very important to make sure that disadvantaged students need to be carefully followed up. And this is a finding from PISA, and you can see different types of teaching pedagogies ranging from helping students learn from mistakes, give problems that require thinking for the extended time, let students decide on their own procedures. So the third column, I would like you to draw the attention. You can see that the third column, let students decide on their own procedure. This is a type of pedagogy where student agency is placed. But research shows that this approach could be beneficial for advantaged students, but may not necessarily for disadvantaged students because they may not be able to make their own decision for their own best benefit. So what are the implications for teachers and school teachers and school principals and researchers as well? So if we really want the students' agency to be at the heart, we, the system and learning environment, need to make efforts to make that happen. And interestingly, when we talked about student agency as the important concept, there were, of course, a lot of different voices. The first question was from teacher unions saying that, what about teacher agency? And then the parental organizations say, what about parent agency? We can't let students or our children decide because they don't know what's best for them. And what about the communities? So we had all of these different agents around students. So we decided to explore further the concept of agency, and we are currently agreeing on the concept of co-agency. And interestingly, students themselves came up with an idea, well, all the adult people, thank you very much for thinking of us, but if you want to be at the center, play the central role, we can change the name of students to learner. So if we put learner agency, teachers, you are also learners, lifelong learners. And parents, you're also learners too. So our framework can be everybody's framework. So a brilliant idea actually came from a student. And also, around the students, in order to be creative, students still need the basic foundational skills. So there are new demands such as global competency, financial literacy, media literacy, entrepreneurship, you name it. There are many, many different demands and new demands of literacies. But we carefully reviewed a lot of empirical research, and we found out that it's not longer only literacy in numeracy that are going to be the foundational skills for students should have, but also data literacy and digital literacy will be part of the foundational skills rather than so-called new demands on literacies. It's nice to have all of these new demands and new literacies, but data literacy and digital literacy continue to grow into the foundational skills. And on top of these foundational skills, for students to really shape the future, we identified 3 key transformative competencies to shape the future. One is creating new value. This value includes anything new products, new processes, new ways of thinking, new ways of learning, new tools, anything new. But that said, not all innovations are good to humankind or to environment. So taking responsibility needs to be coupled with this competency of creating new value. For example, the chemical weapon could be an innovation, but should we have created it in the first place, or if it's there, should we use it? Well, it requires ethical thinking. So taking responsibility is going to be as equally important as creating new value. And also, in creating new value and being creative, there are always tensions and dilemmas. So reconciling tensions and dilemma should also be coupled with the competency of creating new value. And around all of this, of course, teachers and schools often say, well, it's too much for a school to actually teach all of this. And our governments, the OECD countries, recognize that. So in order to develop these competencies, they are acknowledging the competency development cycle to include students need to learn this through action and reflection and anticipation. And you cannot imagine students can do all of this creative work sitting in a classroom by not taking actions. So this is where schools and communities need to work together to allow learning environment wider than a school classroom setting for students to be able to take action and learn from mistakes and reflect on their actions and anticipate. So this is a competency development cycle. And this is just a snapshot of how we are advancing our research related to the key concepts such as student agency, taking responsibility, creating new value, and what are the concrete skills that are closely related to these concepts. And I'm not going to go into these detail. However, I will show you 1 or 2 examples. Let's take an example of student agency. So research shows motivation really matters for student agency. And also research shows that motivation is malleable, especially in adolescence and context specific. So there's ample opportunities for teachers and adolescents working with adolescents to actually help students to increase motivation. And it can be learned not only in school, but communities and families too. And our review of empirical research also shows that motivation does have a long-term effect on student-later outcomes, such as academic achievement and job performance and entrepreneurship. What about creativity? So creating new value is one of the key competencies, as you have seen. And creative thinking is actually related to other skills such as perspective taking, cognitive flexibility, and open mindset. And it is malleable, but especially before age 14. according to neuroscience and developmental psychology. So it is really important that children before this age should really be given the opportunity to exercise their potential that they have about creativity rather than deprive them of the creative opportunities. And it can be learned in school and again also in community and families. And just as motivation, our review of empirical evidence shows that it does have a long-term impact on student later outcomes such as academic achievement, job performance, entrepreneurship as well. And it is measurable, but our stock-taking exercise shows that a lot of measurement instruments are more developed at the school-based rather than a national, large-scale survey. And this is a bigger picture of what I said. I have shown you bit by bit, but now we are trying to examine how these competencies can be translated into so-called curriculum. Curriculum is one of the most rigid way to organize thoughts by knowledge, skills, and attitudes and values. And we are investigating how knowledge for 2030, knowledge can be reorganized for students for 2030, how skills can be taught towards 2030, including not only cognitive and non-cognitive, but more social, emotional skills. And attitudes of values are also important. As I said, the taking responsibility is very important, for which attitudes and values also matter. And let's just think about the curriculum. So we looked at a lot of new demands, including ICT literacy, media literacy, entrepreneurship. On top of this, in the realm of curriculum, a lot of demands come into school. Well, school should teach critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, communication, which we are talking today in this session. And on top of this, as I said, values and attitudes are important, so school should teach empathy, self-control, curiosity, and so on. You can see, even on this slide, it's already crowded with the word. So how can the space of curriculum be well organized and cleaned up for students? Well, let's look at the curriculum with the visual. So you can see a lot of subjects like math, art, sports, and the computers, history, and so on. But behind this, there are, of course, some of you like teachers. And the curriculum space is, of course, limited. Students have only 24 hours, just like we do. And recent research shows that teenagers especially need more sleep for their well-being. But a lot of research also shows contradictory behavior patterns that students often face a sleep deficit in mostly Asian countries, unfortunately, including my own country, Japan too. So in this limited space, a lot of political and sometimes ideological discussions are happening to compete to get into this box. So which subject should go into this limited space for how many hours? And of course, at the first, literacy, numeracy, or core subject gets in, but then, well, it's not enough. We need more non-core or non-academic subject. It gets crowded, but just to be fair for everybody, let's put everything in the space. So this is what OECD country government representative report to us. Curriculum overload is an issue. Students are overloaded with so many knowledge, and they don't have enough time to learn deep. So we are trying to rethink about the curriculum from more learning to deeper learning. So food for thought for today's discussion: how can we ensure students happier and quality learning time to foster creativity? We all know from our own experience, to be creative, we need some free time to wonder about. So, some implications. For shifting from more learning to deeper learning, let's look at the learning time. This is again from PISA. So the blue bar shows the intended learning time at school. Let's add study time after school. And you can see that these are the differing learning time in total. Then let's put on top of this the learning scores. And interestingly, it's not that more learning leads to better scores. For example, Finland and Germany, Switzerland, they don't spend not as much as other countries, but they do perform well on PISA. So just one implication for your thinking. Another implication, let's look at the life satisfaction among 15-year-old students. Again, this is from PISA. For example, Korea, Hong Kong, China, they perform really well on PISA, congratulations. But when it comes to students' life satisfaction, they don't really report as high as other countries. Then the researchers and us question, is there a trade-off? So if students work harder, they can't report happy. Well, that's not really the case, because other countries who also perform well on PISA, such as Netherlands, Finland, Switzerland, Estonia, they perform well, but they do report, the students do report that they are very satisfied or satisfied. Again, a reflection for your thinking. So the final food for thought is, yes, instead of adding a lot of new subjects, Australia is currently trying to rethink about how to organize curriculum, and they created a heat map. And they try to see which kind of skills can be embedded in existing subject, not adding a new subject. And let's look at the creative thinking, and you can see the hotter color, like redder, the higher. And you can see a lot of subjects are actually intended to teach creative and critical thinking. However, Australian colleagues also think it's not only the curriculum, but whether the curriculum is actually implemented in classroom really matters. So our curriculum analysis have 5 points. One is written curriculum, and the second is taught curriculum, what teachers do, and third is attained curriculum, whether students actually achieved that intended curriculum, and experience curriculum, the students actually experience the happiness about the learning process, and negotiated curriculum if students have some say in the curriculum design themselves. So that's the short summary of the OECD's reflection on curriculum design, and I hope this can help your discussion today. Thank you.